Today, we are diving deep into some of history's darkest chapters. We're going to look at rulers whose names have become a shorthand for pure evil. But it's a really interesting question. What is it that turns a powerful leader into an absolute monster? The line between a strong ruler and an outright tyrant can get pretty blurry. Is it about the body count, the motivation behind their actions, or is it all just a matter of who's telling the story?
And this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Take Vlad the Impaler. To his own people, he was a national hero, the guy who defended their homeland. But to his enemies? Well, sadistically impaling 20,000 people is pretty much the definition of a nightmare. It really shows how your perspective can define who the monster is. That said, some cases in history are a lot less gray.
Which brings us to our first figure, Emperor Nero of Rome. See, his brand of cruelty wasn't about defending borders or grand strategy. It was deeply personal. It was paranoid, and honestly, it was often just plain theatrical. His time in power is really a tale of two halves. He takes the throne when he's just 16, and for a while, things actually go surprisingly well. But there's this one single event, a turning point, that sends his rule completely spiraling into a reign of terror, which ends with him being declared an enemy of the state. Okay, so let's actually talk about those good years. Because you're not going to believe this. The infamous Nero, he banned capital punishment. He lowered taxes, he supported the arts, and he even gave new rights to slaves. For a hot minute, he actually seemed like a really progressive and benevolent ruler. So what on earth went wrong? Well, that turning point was his mother. Agrippina was a political powerhouse. She's the one who put him on the throne, and she tried to control him from behind the scenes. So to finally get total power for himself, Nero had her killed. And this act, murdering his own mom, that seems to be the moment he completely broke from any kind of moral compass. After that, the violence just went off the rails. He executed his first wife and kept her head as a trophy. He reportedly kicked his second wife, who was pregnant, to death during a rage. Friends, rivals, anyone who annoyed him could be next. He even had a senator killed, supposedly just because he found the man's expression boring. The cruelty became erratic and deeply, deeply personal. Then came the disaster that would define his legacy forever. In 64 AD, the Great Fire of Rome erupted, and it destroyed, get this, a staggering 71% of the city. I mean, it's a catastrophe on a scale that's almost impossible to imagine. And this is where we get that famous saying, right? Nero fiddled while Rome burned. The rumor was that he was just playing his instrument, watching the city go up in flames, maybe even because he wanted to clear some land for a fancy new palace. Now, there's no actual proof this happened, but the fact that people believed it, that tells you everything you need to know about how they saw him, as a monster, totally detached from their suffering. All right, so from Nero's personal paranoia, we're going to pivot to a completely different kind of evil. This is Timur, also known as Tamerlane. He was a warlord whose cruelty wasn't about personal grudges. It was about conquest on a world-altering scale. Just look at that number. During his military campaigns across Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Europe, it's estimated that Timur's actions led to the deaths of 17 million people. Just let that sink in for a moment. And to really put that number into perspective, 17 million people at that time, around 1405, was about 5% of the entire global population. He literally altered the demographics of the planet through sheer brutality. His methods were just terrifyingly direct. When the city of Isfahan surrendered to him, he initially spared it. But after a small group of citizens revolted and killed some of his soldiers, his response was absolute. He didn't just punish the rebels. He ordered the extermination of every single man, woman, and child in the entire city. This quote from a survivor is incredibly difficult to read, but it's crucial to understanding the horror. After ordering children under 7 to be separated from their families, he forced his own men to trample them with their horses. When they hesitated, he rode in first himself. This wasn't just warfare. It was an act of unimaginable terror, designed to break the will of anyone who might even think about defying him. So from the personal evil of Nero and the conquering evil of Timur, we're going to turn to a more modern, almost bureaucratic kind of horror. Meet King Leopold II of Belgium, a man who committed his atrocities not with a sword, but with ledgers and decrees. Back in the 1880s, Leopold convinced the world to grant him personal control over a massive piece of Central Africa, an area he ironically named the Congo Free State. He claimed his mission was humanitarian, to end slavery and bring civilization. The reality, though, was pure exploitation.
So the automobile had just been invented, creating this global hunger for rubber, and Leopold saw his chance to get obscenely rich. He turned the entire state into one giant slave labor camp. His private army forced Congolese men to meet impossible rubber quotas. And if you failed to deliver, the punishment was torture, mutilation, and death. It was a brutal system that became known as red rubber for all the blood that was spilled.
And here's maybe the most chilling part of all. King Leopold orchestrated this entire genocide from the comfort of his palaces in Belgium. He never once set foot in the Congo. His evil was detached, managed through other people, and driven entirely by profit.
The result of the system was the death of an estimated 10 million Congolese people. They died from murder, from forced labor, and from the famine and disease that just ripped through their communities as their society was systematically destroyed.
So, what can we take away from these three horrifying examples? What does the evil of a Roman emperor, a medieval conqueror, and a modern king tell us about power and cruelty?
This slide lays it out perfectly. You've got three totally distinct faces of tyranny. Nero's was personal and paranoid, driven by madness. Timur's was about conquest and total domination. And Leopold's was cold, systemic, and driven by greed. It proves that absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it corrupts in profoundly different yet equally monstrous ways.
And that leaves us with a final vital question. The evil we've looked at wasn't always obvious to everyone at the time. It was masked as stability, as conquest, as philanthropy. So if evil can be personal, military, or even bureaucratic, how do we stay vigilant and recognize its new forms in our own world?